guys, it's Alicia from My Work Basket here with you today. I got a couple projects I'm going to work on. For one thing, you can see I have a massive pile of fabric next to me. I'm going to do something a little bit crazy with this fabric. So I've mentioned that I have a laundry basket full of fabric that I got at auction, and I got a great deal on it, especially for what it is, because it turned out to be mostly what appears to be wool blends. And some of them are like really thick, beautiful, like you'd use them for a coat wool blends. But I don't usually make clothes. Like, I don't make a lot of clothes, and most of them are not quite right for anything I'd make myself. And I keep fighting this urge. I'm like, you know what I want to do? I want to make a blanket. And so I keep fighting the urge, and I keep putting off working with the fabric at all, because since I think it's wool, I either need to do like a burn test or like wash them and see what happens, and like wash a swatch and measure it and all this. And I keep putting off working with it because I don't know what to do with it, because I don't know what the blends are. So I've decided to do something a little bit crazy. I'm going to take all these beautiful, potentially wool fabrics, and I'm going to wash them. I'm going to wash each one by itself and essentially see what happens. And if it shrinks, it shrinks. And then I have that shrunken felted wool, and I know what I can, I'll know what I can use it for. The wide variety of crafts I do, if it felts, I can make a rug. If it felts, I can make hot pads. I can make felted hats. I can make felted mittens. I can cut it into strips for rug making. I can cut it into strips for, I just totally forgot the name of the technique. It's a type of rug technique, mocker hooking. So if it felts, I'll know what to do with it. Like when I know what happens with it, when I have a better idea of what it is, then I'll have a better idea of what to do with it. So I got this big old stack of fabrics here. I've got this really nice kind of camel color. And this one, I think it's this one. One of these two really big pieces actually seems to be, it is this one. It actually seems like it might be a blanket. So that one might end up just being like the back if I do like quilt style. And then I have these other smaller pieces, and they're also all browns. I don't do a lot with brown. Like, I don't wear a lot of brown. And then this other one is one of the very just kind of thick, full, I mean, like this would make a nice jacket or something. It's a beautiful color. And this is another one that's like big enough to be a full blanket. So I'm gonna wash them all one at a time and see what happens, and like kind of decide from there. And then at the bottom of this pile is also something for my husband's work, where I've got to move some buttons and do some stuff for him. So I'm going to wash this fabric. We're going to see what happens. I'll go over what I'm going to do with it, depending on how it felts or not. And I mean, even if it does felt, I can still do a blanket, so we'll see. Also, as a quick follow-up, I've been working on my needle point. I moved it into a box because I was trying to have it just kind of on the side of the table, all stacked up, ready to work. And I was constantly finding pieces on the floor because I do share the space with my son, and I was just getting really annoying. So I grabbed this box and put it in here. So a quick show off runway is coming along. And that video will be up, so you'll know what I'm talking about by the time you see this, hopefully. So he's coming along. That's a little update on how that's going. It's working along pretty well. I'm struggling to figure out kind of how to do his face, because he was extremely white-faced and old. But he wasn't always white-faced and old. And then the picture I'm using as an example for my needlepoint, the one it's based on, I had to brighten it up a bunch to get it to print properly. And so the lighting isn't exactly right in the picture either. Like, it's not extremely accurate to his coloring. So I'm kind of struggling on how to do the face without making it look too Picasso, with like kind of almost like chunks of different colors. Like, I don't want that. I do have quite a stack of similar shades, so I'm kind of working on it. So first I'm going to put some stuff in the washer. Then I'm going to work on these buttonholes, and let's just see what happens today. Okay, so starting that wash took so much longer than expected. I went to get some iced coffee, opened the refrigerator door, and an entire jar of jelly just comes out right onto the floor. Like the craziest thing I've ever seen. Entire bottom of the jelly jar like busted out, and it's just standing on the floor, like otherwise perfectly normal, except now there's like glass everywhere and the bottle is broken. So I had to stop everything, sweep, mop, like get that all cleaned up. It was wild. So what I'm doing now, my husband bought this for work, and the button was just sewn straight onto like the shoulder placket. And he actually needs a functioning buttonhole and a button. So I'm just cutting that buttonhole open and putting the button onto the actual item. But yeah, I just couldn't believe it. Like, I was just trying to make some coffee. And bam. Like, jelly everywhere. Oh, the button went under my tripod. I am so glad I opted to use the doubled thread for that button. That thing was a pain in the butt. Every time, if you saw the camera shift a little bit, it was because I was actually pushing down on the table to get the needle to go through all the layers. And my tripod was essentially under what I was working on. So it would hit the edge of the tripod because I was using the edges of the fabric, the table to like push it through. But I got it done on one side. There's two sides. So now, one down, one to go. Alright, so I've got both buttons done. Both plackets now actually shut. That's what he needed. He has a thing he has to wear on here. Next time my husband says, hey, I need you to sew a button, I think my very proper response is going to be, on what? Because this was annoying and complicated. So by no means are these perfect buttons, just because of how freaking stiff and hard the fabric was. Usually I try to make sure I do a certain amount through each loop. You know, this one I gave it a good tug test. You know, like I can really pull on it. It's not coming off. And it does the job. So that's good enough for me. Let's hope it lasts and I don't have to redo these buttons because, yeah, that was tricky. Besides how thick the fabric is, there's multiple things on the inside that, like, I don't even know what all they do, but there's all these layers on the inside that have to shift to one direction or the other so that you're not sewing through them. And that was a pain in the butt. But my mending job is done, and now I get to move back on to the fun stuff I had planned for the day. Okay, so my first piece of fabric is out of the washer and in the dryer. And I've got to say, it had a weird smell. Like, not like a wool smell. Like, I know the smell of wool. I've worked with wool lots. I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like, as ridiculous as this sounds, it's like I was washing out the ghost of an old lady. Like, And I know this sounds ridiculous, but like that's what comes to mind. Like it just had this weird, almost perfumey smell, but like not perfumey. And we don't use scented detergent. I decided to put in a little bit of detergent. I mean, if I make something with it and I wash it, I'm going to use detergent. So it's part of seeing how it reacts. But also I have a lot of allergies and I did buy it used. So I was like, well, if I'm going to wash it. But like we don't use a highly perfumed detergent, but it had like an odd smell. I don't know if that really tells me anything about the material. I will say, I do think it's at least part wool because it felt remarkably dry out of the washer. And wool holds a lot of water, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's wool. Also, my dryer has a sensor and it literally ran for like 5 minutes and then thought the item was dry, but it does that sometimes. So my second set of fabrics is in the washer now. And originally I was going to do each piece individually to prevent them felting to each other if they felt. But I just didn't feel right wasting that many loads of like wash water. So I put the 3 smaller pieces all in together. They're going now. And I reset the dryer for the big piece to just do a 40-minute time to dry. So they should all be dry at about the same time. The other thing I wanted to work on this weekend was to take my circular knitting machine and see what happens if I just kind of throw some funky yarns in it. Like, I've made quite a few hats with it. Regular worsted weight hats. Like these. This is one, it's not folded up. I haven't even woven any ends yet. The ends. So I've done quite a few hats like this. Just like a regular toboggan, you know, basic knit hat with worsted weight yarn. But I'm kind of curious, like, what happens if we throw this chinchilla in there? You know, what happens if, honestly, I got this crazy yarn, and I think that would make a neat hat. I have several of them, too, so I almost feel weird. There's 6 of these with 110 yards of skein, 111 yards of skein. I almost feel weird wasting those, because I feel like they'd be so good for, like, I don't know, that's enough for, like, a shawl or something. I've still got my bin of black yarns that I use in my other hat project. I've got a pale blue mohair. But I was just kind of thinking, like, what kind of crazy, scrappy thing can we come up with if I just have a bunch of random yarns next to me and see what goes through the machine? It'd be fun to make some really kind of funky hats. I even have these baggies that already have assorted yarns in them. So that would be kind of fun. Like, there's a dyed mohair. There's like a funky ribbon. A lot of these are yarns you would have seen in my scrap Be More haul. That's so weird with the brown and the colorful. Blue eyelash. A purple fuzzy thing. These 3 are so pretty together. Like, honestly, even if you throw that one in there, like, that would be really neat. So yeah, like, I'm just going to see what happens. Now, this machine can be a bit finicky. It doesn't necessarily take every yarn equally. It does kind of play favorites. And if you have one of these and you join something like Facebook groups for these, you'll hear people talk about, like, the same brand of machine doing like different things. Like, honestly, my machine's taken most of the yarns I've tried to get it to do, and I haven't had any problem. But some people have issues with like certain brands, and you'll have some people say like, oh, my machine never works right for this brand, and other people will be like, really? Because that's the one brand my machine always works right on. But I've just got all kinds of these funky yarns. Actually, I know this yarn. This yarn, I have some of this in my other stash. I got this from Scrap Be More in one of these random bags, but this particular yarn was actually sold, I'm pretty sure at Target in like the dollar spot many years ago. Many years ago. Back in like the mid 2000s when knitting was like a huge fad, they had some yarn there. Okay, so let's start with a fairly kind of basic yarn. That's actually a needle point yarn. Let's start with something kind of basic and see what happens. That'll make it be easier to weave in the ends. so that I actually have a hat. So when you work with one of these machines, the most common way of making a hat is to essentially make a long tube and then turn it inside out. That's if you want like a double thick hat, but you can do like a tube and end it off. There's different ways to do it, but by starting with a basic yarn, that means it'll be easier for me to pull my ends in. This yarn that I just grabbed to start with is a bit thinner. It's more of like a sock weight, so I'm going to use it doubled up. The only downside to this idea is that if the machine doesn't like a yarn, it tends to really dislike it and drop a bunch of stitches, which is very hard to kind of fix sometimes. So it's possible that I could be almost done making something, try a new yarn, and the whole thing just completely fall apart. But this machine is so quick that it's not like a huge time loss if that were to happen. So I'm just going to do a few rows of this basic one. As I switch to having more yarns going, I'm going to also switch this to more of a time lapse. I don't think you want to watch me turn a crank for 20 minutes. A couple of tips if you have a machine like this, or if you want a machine like this, is maintain your speed. A lot of people you'll see really cranking it out, and that just makes it a lot more likely to have mistakes. So one thing to note, if you're using any type of knitting machine, and this goes for a circular or a flatbed knitting machine, you always want to make sure that your yarn is flowing smoothly. So that can be that you're pulling several yards out of your skein and then doing some. Also, knots are a big problem. So if you find a knot like I just did, you always want to stop and get that knot out before it gets all the way into your machine, because that is the type of thing that'll cause the machine to skip stitches, to drop the yarn and things like that. So you always want to make sure that your yarn is very smooth, just like flowing through your fingers, flowing through the machine, so that you don't get any tension issues, so that the machine doesn't hit a knot and drop a stitch or something. Okay, so I am hitting some issues. It's happening as I switched from this white puffy chinchilla yarn to this kind of, I don't even know what to call it, just absolutely funky yarn. I'm not sure if I can get it on camera as to what it looks like when the machine messes up. But as you can see here, hopefully see here, each loop, each little pop-up has a loop around it. And what's happening is some of them are not getting that loop around it. So you'll see here, this one doesn't have kind of a loop around the bottom. And that causes problems in the next row. And that can cause either drop stitches or that can cause tuck stitches, depending on exactly what's happening. And part of what's happening is that with the chinchilla being so loose, it's not pulling all the way down on the needle properly in order to create the next stitch. And I've been able to fix most of them by just going slow and really making sure that those stitches pop all the way down on the needle. But it's very possible, let's see if you can see this. So see on this needle that's about to go through the machine, This is the thread that it's working with. See how there's a loop far up there? You don't want that. You want to make sure that sucks all the way down. So I'm not sure if after this, I'm trying to do a few more rows of this color. And it might turn out that after this color, I end up kind of having to take it off the machine and start over, or take the white yarn out. I might be able to still kind of fix it. See, here's another one where it's not going down that loop. And you can just push that with your finger. The big thing is just you want it to go down. Honestly, I don't know if the problem was the chinchilla yarn or the yarn I'm doing now, or kind of a combination of both. But I'm hitting some issues here. I might stop using this yarn and go back to a basic yarn, like maybe this blue that I started with, and use that to kind of, oh, you can see, nope, somewhere has dropped a stitch. These stitches that run across are what happens when you drop a stitch, and it had to have happened. It probably goes all the way up. Well, that one looks like it was in the blue. So yeah, it's dropped a stitch. The good thing with this machine, it hasn't been that long. The time investment is much shorter than if you do it by hand. So it's not as much lost time to try something. And let me show you how to get it off the machine. Turn my camera around a bit here. Getting it off the machine is quite quick and very rewarding, especially after there's been kind of an issue. All you do is cut your thread and keep turning. Now, if you were doing a full project and you want to, this isn't usually how you're going to take a project off. This is how you're going to take a mistake off the machine. Every time you hear that kind of tight click, that's where essentially there was an issue earlier on. And after you just roll it around a couple times, you'll see most of these are unattached. So then you just go around again and pop it off of any where it's just holding on there and refusing to let go. Anywhere that it's holding on is probably the source of a problem several rows back. Wow, that one's really on quite tight. So I think this fun yarn was really kind of causing some issues. I thought maybe it was the looseness of the chinchilla that was causing some problems, but now I think it may have actually been the fun yarn. So you can either unhook it from the top, or you can make sure it's pushed all the way down. If it pushes all the way down, then it'll fall off the next time you go around. So that idea is kind of back to the drawing board. I could start the same project over and just not use this yarn, not use the white yarn. I haven't really decided yet. I mean, it's look how fuzzy that mohair is on the inside of the hat. But the outside of the hat actually looks fairly normal. So the mohair especially was a good example of how I was saying you want to keep your yarn free flowing, because mohair really sticks to each other. So you really want to pull out several yards before you kind of keep going. So I'm just going to ball this back up as a mystery ball, toss it back into scrap bin, and we'll kind of see what happens. But honestly, it could be, if I wanted to take the time to actually finish the edges. I mean, it's still a very kind of funky cowl or headband. It's a little bit loose. But even though it kind of didn't work, I could have taken the time to finish it off properly, and it could still be useful for other things. So yeah, so there's that. I'm going to do some more kind of general stuff today. Probably try this again, ball that up, keep washing yarn. And that's probably about it for me today. Thanks for watching. Hope this gave you some tips and ideas. I will check in probably in another video on what happened with all the wool type fabric I was washing and what I'm going to do with it. I still have one more I've got to get going in the washer and dryer. The other batches might not even be done yet. It actually hasn't been all that long that I was working on this hat. With this type of circular machine, you can make a hat in as little as 20 minutes. So, I mean, I haven't been working on it all that long. So I'm going to keep working kind of behind the scenes that's it for me today. I'll be back with another video about what happened with my fabric. I thank you for watching. I thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. If you like anything, feel free to comment. No hateful comments, please. This just ain't the place for that. Like, we're all about love and happiness, trying some things and having fun with it. So, you know, mean comments, they're not fun, and that's not what we're about here. So, thanks for watching, and I appreciate you watching my work basket.